Hello, everyone. It's Matt Moshe. Welcome back to Product for Product. Thanks for tuning in this week. We are excited to have Maarten Dalmijn on the show to talk about Jira. Jira is a software development platform with a wide range of features and use cases. Today, we'll be discussing its use in road mapping. So welcome to the show, Maarten. Thanks for joining us. Let's take a sec to introduce yourself before we get started.
Hi, I'm Maarten. Maarten Dalmijn. I live in the Netherlands. I live in Hilversum. So I've been building software products for around 10 years. And interestingly enough, for all of those 10 years, I've used Jira. So I have a lot of experience with their tools. And so lately I've been using Jira Portfolio, and I've developed my own way of doing road mapping within Jira.
Perfect. Hi, Maarten. Moshe here. And what's the name of the company where you're working?
Yeah, sure. So I'm currently head of product at a Dutch startup with around 40 employees, and it's called Rodeo, and it's a SaaS startup building projects for creative professionals, project management software for creative professionals.
Oh, that's interesting. Creative as in like artists or content creators?
Digital agencies, content creators, like making videos, these kind of companies, mostly smaller sized businesses.
Oh, interesting. So when people think about tools for road mapping, I don't think they usually think about Jira. And I know when we talked about it beforehand, that was also part of our discussion about, or we presented it as a Jira tool for road mapping or presented it as something else. But I really like your point of view of this. I know that you're writing a lot about it on Medium and on LinkedIn, and you have quite a bit of following these days. You seem to be very passionate about agility and Scrum. Tell us a bit about, your perspective. How do you see it, and how did you get to just use Jira?
It's a very good question. So I was actually working at a company, and we had an extremely elaborate process for road mapping. I mean, if more process and more details and more instructions will lead to better roadmaps, we're in the Champions League of roadmaps, or the Super Bowl, But the fact of the matter was, we actually spent so much time on those roadmaps, and there were colors, there were rules on how big an initiative could be. We needed to plan for 9 months, indicate dependencies in a special way, business cases for every initiative on the roadmap. It was crazy. And then we had to go into a room for the whole day, and every team had their own roadmap. And then what happened was, so everybody was excited, right? We were grilled on our roadmaps and everything was done finally. So everybody was excited to get started. And then the reality was all those roadmaps weren't delivered, and nobody was collaborating with each other because every team had their own roadmap. And they were like, we're going to try and finish our own roadmap. And they didn't, because basically you need each other. And I still remember the moment we needed another team, we literally would ask the following question: how can we do it without requiring help from another team, which is pretty bad.
So just to be a bit more clear about that, what type of roadmaps were those?
Yeah, so that's a very good point. So there were timeline and feature-based roadmaps, and 9 months in the future. And basically, when you would indicate, for example, something would be delivered end of February, then it should be delivered end of February. So it was extremely rigid. And the problem with that is, you make all these plans, and then reality comes in and you have no flexibility anymore. And your estimates, of course, are always wrong. And you're just doomed from the start.
So did they at least learn from those mistakes that they saw that it doesn't work, or they just continue their merry way and just thought, oh, this is perfect?
So I have to be really honest here. So I tried super hard to change it, and I'm not going to name any names. There was someone high up who basically believed in this process. And I tried for months and many conversations to convince this person, hey, he was not a product person at all. So I actually confronted him during a meeting with all the product owners, like, hey, we're the product owners, let us decide the way of road mapping. And his ultimate answer was, I don't trust you guys. So this is my way of doing road mapping, so I can have control. That's basically what it boiled down to.
Yeah, so it was a trust issue.
Yeah, and then what's interesting, what I said is, well, look, I've tried talking to you. I don't feel heard. So the only thing I can do is I'm going to do road mapping the way I like it, because I don't feel heard. So I have no other option than to rebel. So I did that. I basically made my own roadmap, and I refused to continue with that process. And that's
how did that work?
Fight the power.
Well, it was not really appreciated. But I was like, yeah, at some point, I'm not going to continue. So one advantage I have, of course, like they cannot fire me over this, right? So I was like, I'm just going to do it this way. And if it leads to huge problems, which it didn't, so I'll deal with that later.
So let me ask another question on that. Those roadmaps, were they only used internally, only to synchronize the work between the different development teams, or were they used also externally, either with other teams in the organization or even with clients outside of the organization?
Yeah, so they were used to coordinate between teams. That was one of the functions. They were used to make sure that we're working on what's most valuable based on these business cases. And what's interesting is all these business cases were just made up. Like there were assumptions in there, but no experiments done to validate. So it was all... So basically became a game of inflating the business cases. So your little kingdom mattered. And we were dealing with many different stakeholders. So they were using it to see, hey, what are we doing? And is it important for us?
You mentioned feature-based roadmaps. I know that's something that Moshe and I have talked about a lot, feature-based versus outcome-based. So was that something you were also frustrated with or had questions about?
Well, the thing is, what I firmly believe is you cannot change everything at once. For this company already, the fact that if we just would have gone for a more flexible time-based roadmap, that would have already been a step. You cannot change everything at once. So ideally, that's what you want, right? But I don't think you can convince a company that's so far removed from that to take all those steps at the same time. So I was aiming for just having a feature-based roadmap. And the approach I took was actually making a now, next, later roadmap. And I did that by using a Kanban board in Jira, which is super easy. It's actually not a feature of Jira in that sense. It's not their road mapping feature, which I really don't like because basically you need to drag and drop all these things. It takes a lot of time. And the approach I came up with, it's 3 minutes to update it. And you have something you can show to stakeholders. So it's super easy.
So just sorry that I'm staying back with that example, because I think this is a perfect example to launch you into how you do things and how you use Jira. So before we delve into that, just a bit more on the example itself. So my understanding is that, of course, it was a feature-based roadmap, but before it was also time-based with like a Gantt chart, I would guess. Will have milestones and will tell you have to finish this by that time, and otherwise you failed or whatever it is. And then you change it to now, next, later, still feature-based, not outcome-based yet.
No, that's what I did there at least, because I was like, one step at a time.
Now, what about your marketing and sales departments over there, or even customer success? Would they be drawing from those roadmaps towards their work, or how they plan their work, or what they promise to their clients?
That's an excellent question. So basically, this was an e-commerce company. So customer success, there were other kinds of stakeholders, right? But what I can say is from my experience in SaaS startups, one of the big challenges is, of course, sales. They always want to know when is it done, and preferably they want to sell it before it's almost just before it's done, so that so we get another customer, everybody's happy, and the sales guy gets a nice commission. That also plays a role, of course.
So how do you resolve that type of tension?
So what I can say is what I always find very interesting, I'm also curious to hear your experience, is what I've seen very often happen is if you sell stuff that you're not working on right now, there's a huge risk there. Like I've literally seen stuff being sold months before it was completed, and then it would get delayed. Well, that will be a best case scenario, right? I mean, it just gets delayed. It still is annoying, but I've even had cases where it got delayed, but then it also turned out that the exact way it was specified in the contract, it wasn't possible. And then the whole customer exploded and was super angry. And salespeople got into a burnout, even talking to this customer. So these are the horror scenarios that I've witnessed firsthand.
It's the opposite of agility.
Absolutely.
And the agility principles.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I think is super important is, of course, if you're in a startup and you have cash flow problems, you need to take risks, right? But you need to watch out for the risks you take. I try to not sell stuff unless we're working on it right now. We know reasonably well what it's going to do. But I've worked at companies where we basically sold a plugin, right? And they came to me And they said, hey, Maarten, we need to build this. It needs to be done in 3 months. And I asked them, okay, so it's a Drupal plugin. Which version of Drupal? I don't know. Okay. Do you know how many PHP developers we have? No, 0. So I've got 12 weeks to finish a plugin, which includes hiring a developer to do it. Great.
I can tell you from my experience that I've been there many times. And I don't know if I mentioned it in the previous episodes about road mapping. I don't think I did, Matt, but correct me if I'm wrong here, or keep me honest at least. I'm not a big fan of roadmaps in general.
Yes.
Nice. And the reason I'm not a big fan of roadmaps is because of all of these reasons that you already mentioned, Maarten. I've seen it again and again, trying to put these type of roadmaps that we are trying to guess when we're going to be done with something. And then we're trying to guess what is the outcome going to be. And people are selling it way before it is available. And then you get into all of this trouble. So yes. I think that this is really a common thread for everyone that is in our industry that have gone through multiple experiences. You said you started 10 years ago. I'm talking here. I started 30 years ago. So I had a bit more. I've seen a bit more in my time, but it was exactly like that. We had sales selling. They're not just selling features we didn't have or we thought we will have in the roadmap in 6 months or a year, but they also sold to clients that, we didn't have anything. We had to, struggle, like you said, that example you gave. We had to build a whole new product, a whole new feature just for them, and then kind of shove it and fit it into our product. And just because they paid, $100,000 now or $500,000 now or whatever it is, it was really good for the sales guy, but it was really bad for the product.
Right.
No one used it after. Even the clients that bought it, they didn't use half of it or more even sometimes. So these days I'm always looking, is the company has a rule that we are not accepting any type of clients like that, or they don't, because I think that can change the gameplay for a company.
Yeah, you raise a very strong point. And what I always try to do during interviews is get to see their roadmap, because basically the roadmap is where you can see how agile they really are. That's my opinion, at least. Point. Because basically,
definitely,
if you just ask how are they working in the team level, you will hear the same things. Yeah, we're using sprint goals. We've got a scrum master, blah, 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 blah. But if you look at the roadmap, then they need to put the money where their mouth is. And then you see a roadmap 9 months in the future with exact timelines. And then you know it's a lie. Like it's not agile. Because the thing is, agile is about this balance between looking ahead, designing, analyzing. You still need to do that, right? But you also need to react in the moment and act based on what you discover. And this balancing act can only happen if you have flexibility in scope and timelines and to do what's most valuable in the moment.
Exactly. And on top of the roadmap, that's an excellent suggestion. On top of the roadmap, you can also ask them things about, their sales. How do they actually sell the product? Do they sell it to anyone that will buy, or do they sell it only to the people that fit their product market fit? And how do they deal with outcome versus outputs and things like that? And sometimes they will ask you questions that will be related to that directly, and you can sense already how they work. So let's now go to how you do it these days with Jira, because that's really interesting to me. You say it's simple, which is great. Simple is always good. Do you already do it as an outcome-based roadmap?
No, at the moment not, but I'll explain more why, because basically at the moment I'm busy rebuilding a product. So you don't have the same kind of flexibility. You have existing customers, they expect certain features, you have a certain data model. So I mean, maybe you have better ideas than me, but I find that very challenging. Like you cannot, of course, we're interviewing customers and we're finding out stuff we can do better. But you cannot just basically say, hey, we're going to throw everything away. We're not going to talk about features. We're just going to think about outcomes. Like I find it at least very difficult to do in that context.
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion, and it would be interesting to see examples out there, because I think most people don't do it. And that's why seeing examples will be really refreshing. Eddie Sawyers, in our last episode about ProdPad, he mentioned that he does it in outcome-based roadmap. So that will be interesting to have a look if you can show it to us, of course, because many of these things are proprietary. But in general, the way I like to think about it is if I know my vision and I know my strategy, and I know based on that what are the product objectives I'm trying to get, then I can plug them into my roadmap. There is definitely that balance between specific feature that I'm trying to build, because that's what will go eventually to the product, to the development team, to the product team, and also to the stakeholders. But at the same time, tie them with those outcomes. So tie them with those outcomes. And on a regular basis, of course, we have to measure the success of those outcomes. So I think we have to define almost like a threshold to say, this is a threshold that we have to really achieve in this outcome. And if we're not achieving that, it still have to stay in the same location. It doesn't move to done yet. It's almost like the definition of done for that. But that's my take on that. And I'm sure there is a lot of other takes on that. Any thoughts about that?
No, I completely agree. I think the challenge there is, of course, you have the business and the customer outcomes. So if you develop a feature and you know the goals of the user, then you can measure if whether that user can achieve those goals in your product by measuring what are they doing in the product to achieve those goals. Mm-hmm. But yeah, then in the end, you want to know what does it add to our business, and that's, I think, is always the challenging part, because that's in the end the lagging outcome you want to measure. But there's not always, I mean, it's very difficult to establish this direct relationship between adding this button that enables this small thing for a customer. It does add value, but how do you attach it to monetary value?
Mm-hmm. So what level do you go down in your roadmap? Do you put in your roadmap only like epics, or do you also go down to specific stories in there?
So what I actually do, so it's very interesting, because I thought about it before this episode, right? So what's the difference between a product backlog and a roadmap? Because if you look at a product backlog, you can also see what a team is working on. But I think the key difference is that a roadmap should show the big chunks. It's not about the small chunks. It should give you an overview, give you like an idea, what is the big picture of what we're going to be working on next. Mm-hmm. That's the purpose of the roadmap. It should be, and business stakeholders should be able to understand it. They don't care about the user stories. What are the rough chunks you're going to be working on? So yeah, for me, it's on the epic level. And if you start talking on a lower level than that, I don't think it's a roadmap. Yeah, then it's a product backlog.
Mm-hmm. So you have like your own separate board, I guess, in Jira that you use that.
Yes.
And then you put on it, are they separate tickets, or they are the same, like the same tickets that might appear also on the team board?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is what you can do actually is you can filter across Jira projects, because it could be that all your teams are in the same project, but very often this is not the case. So you actually, if you want to make a roadmap across teams, which is what I want, because we have 4 teams at the moment, then you actually can filter on all epics across all projects in a Kanban board. And then basically you need to configure it to have now, next, and later columns, and map specific epic statuses to these columns, whichever what you have in your workflow, doesn't really matter. And then you can track, okay, for every epic you work on, so every user story, the first time you work on a user story, you just need to put this epic on in progress. And then you see, hey, it's in the now status because we're currently working on it. So it's that simple. It's really easy. And what I do is every 2 weeks, I work using Scrum. I go through the board with my stakeholders and I show them, hey, this we're working on at the moment. I even sometimes add a due date if that's important, right? So it's a forecast. I tell them, hey, this is based on the current information. It's not a promise, because it can change, because we can discover something. And for everything next and later, I don't put a date, because if anything in the now gets delayed, then everything in the next gets delayed. But that's not how stakeholders think. They will still think whatever timeline I put on there, it's still going to be that date. So I just don't add any dates. I just tell them, hey, you want to know what we're working on next? Look at the order. The dates, I don't know yet.
It doesn't matter how many disclaimers we tell them about the dates, they still forget it.
Yes, exactly. So I try to just explain to them, I'm not adding dates, because what's the point? They can change. It's too uncertain for now.
Yeah. My stakeholders actually right now, they want to see dates, but what they want to see also, if I change the date, they want to see the reasons why we changed them. So at least that, they don't hold me to those dates specifically, but they want to basically understand, what were the cause for those changes. And if you track the reasons and the reasons are reasonable, then there is no issue there. And the reasons could be added complexity, gaps that we found. Someone took their second shot of vaccine and they got sick from that. Whatever it is, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because lives happen.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, I also try to be transparent, but I think the key challenge is very often you're dealing with stakeholders. They're not that technical, and it can literally be something very small, which has a huge impact. And then you need to explain that to them, and they're like, how can this have such a big impact? So that's, I think, sometimes can be challenging.
That's true. That's true. And you also mentioned that there is another feature of Jira that you're not using, you don't like. Yeah. What was that? Was it portfolio or?
Yeah, I also used portfolio. Actually, I used Jira has multiple road mapping features. So they actually have Jira portfolio, which I had to use because the company was using it. I really hated it, but I can explain why. And they also had this simple road mapping feature in next-gen Jira, which I also didn't really like, to be honest. So I think they should just market their Kanban board or make it like easier to set up. They have a wizard. It works better than anything they're currently offering.
So why didn't you like the other two features?
Yeah, so Jira Portfolio is very focused on meeting timelines. It's very focused on forecasting based on your velocity. It has a lot of strange quirks. For example, if it prioritizes based on the order of your backlog, so it can plan for you. You can also plan different scenarios. So as you can see, it's really focused on planning 9 months ahead of time and providing forecasts, which I think is kind of delusional.
So same problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and what happens is, for example, let's say you're working on once you increase the priority of one story, then all the stories belonging in that epic are also going to be prioritized higher. So it has very strange quirks. So even if you use it for planning, it's almost unworkable.
And the same thing with the roadmap feature?
Yeah, so next-gen Jira, I just think it's so basic. Like, it could be that my knowledge is outdated, right? I have to be fair because next-gen Jira, they roll out a lot of new features, but I think I looked a few months back. And yeah, you can add an epic and you can basically have some dates and you can visualize it again in a month view. And yeah, I don't find that interesting to do that, to hit these timelines.
I see. Okay, cool.
I was thinking it might be an advantage that you at least have roadmap and backlog all in one spot, because that would seem to be an advantage of having this.
That's for sure, because then you don't have to worry also, do they have an integration with Jira or they don't have integration with Jira?
For sure. But then of course I'm looking at it from the perspective as a board is as well a click away, right? It's in the same view. You just need to click on the board. If you look at it the way from it's better than what there are other things they're offering. Yeah, I agree with you. But
I also like systems that have more functionalities that can help me with other things that I need to do rather than just
more of a platform.
More of a platform rather than just unique for one thing. And then I also like simplicity. So when you can do things in a simpler way, then it's better. Now, in this series, we're also talking about feedback and ideas and how people are collecting them and systemize the collection of them, and then how they go into the roadmap. And all the other road mapping system that we were looking at, they have this type of functionality. So people can actually submit their ideas, submit their feedback about the product, and the product managers can go in there and organize them in a way, merge things together or whatever it is, and then pull them into their prioritization and into the roadmap. How do you handle that? If you do, I know some people don't do it yet, or they just do it in spreadsheets, but that's fine. It's just interesting to understand your process.
Yeah, so what's interesting is, I don't know if you're familiar with Shape Up from Ryan Singer from Basecamp. Mm-hmm. Basically, what I believe is truly good ideas will often come back, right? So I'm not a big fan of collecting huge list of ideas, because if you're not going to work on it in the next few months, I don't see the value in having a list of 100 ideas. That's my personal opinion. So what I do keep track of the things where I'm like, okay, I really want to work on this in the next few months, but I'm not a big fan of tracking stuff just so that I can work on it 6 months later, because
ideas may change.
And it's based on the current. So the problem is, when this idea comes in, it's based on the current understanding you have, right?
Yeah.
And when you're doing product management, you're learning. That's the whole point. You're learning more about the customer and about the business. So it can become very dangerous that you're just trying to tick off these ideas that are made when you had less understanding and less information. So I think that's my main reasoning for not doing it. But I do think like all this information about customer data, like you should keep that. But just ideas, I'm not a big fan.
I see. It's an interesting point of view. I think it also goes to maybe a bit of personality. I know that I kind of like this type of functionalities, but I'm also a bit of a hoarder. Like I like collections, and I like to collect stuff that my wife doesn't like me to collect. So. So sometimes I'm kind of like, oh, maybe I should just write it down somewhere so I will have it for the future. Yeah. But I also have gone through several.
Why did I do that?
Processes. I've gone through several processes of cleaning up backlogs with like stuff that were there for years and years and no one looked at them. And then it's like, why do I even need to have it on my backlog?
Yeah.
So when you don't have those long lists, you don't have to clean them up, which is great. But on the other end, some of the features these type of products provide is also for the users and clients to vote on the features that they want. And you might have been on your end as a user of products, you might have been on this end, suggesting a feature for one of your favorite products and maybe even upvote it so they will pay more attention to it. What's your take on that?
I think that's super nice because if it doesn't get a high amount of votes, you're not really going to take a look at it, right? I mean,
exactly.
So I think I'm really in favor of that because I can tell you for sure how often I've been using a tool. For example, I'm using Ghost for my personal blog. I want to suggest features. They don't have a feature board. I mean, I want to tell them, hey, I need this, and then maybe there's someone else, right? So, but I think it's a great way to get feedback from users and. Of course, you need to take a look at it and whether it makes sense. But I think at least that way, you're not having this whole idea management problem where you need to clean up everything.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So that will be a balance between the two, I guess. And it will be interesting to me to hear in the future, if you decide to implement something like that at Rodeo or somewhere else, what did you decide doing? Because you might want to have that type of voting functionality or suggestion, but without all the back end of, hundreds of ideas.
Well, and I was thinking about ProdPad on our previous call where ProdPad does recommendations. So if someone's entering an idea, I think how Eddie described it, it kind of gives them recommendation for like other things people have asked. So then maybe that would be steer people in a direction where you could rank the ideas and rank the feedback. So you knew which people, had the most valuable ideas or of all the ideas instead of having a big pot.
But on the other end, I've seen also, ideas that have been highly voted, but still the company did not implement them. So I think there are other forces that happen behind the scenes that we don't know about.
Sure.
That could be good forces or bad forces, like pet projects or whatever it is.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think this is always the challenge, right? Even though it's top for the customers, there are all these other things going on. And then, they go to the teams, we need to do this. And they're like, we've got 10 other things we're working on.
Exactly.
And then it doesn't.
Yeah. I can tell you that I'm using Waze for years now. And I really like that product. And I bought 2 years ago, or 3 years ago now, I got an electric vehicle. And one of the features they don't have on Waze is the ability to find the charger. So you want to drive, you want to maybe change your drive just if you need a charger, but can't have it on Waze. So I went and I, upvoted it. There was already a request for that. I upvoted that. They didn't add it yet. And that was like a while ago. And I think many more people added their votes for that, I'm sure, because more people are buying those cars. And for that, I have to go and find another product. There are a few other products that provide that, but they don't provide the flexibility of, routes that Waze does. So I think that there is a balance there that we have to work with on both ends, see how it will work.
What I find interesting is how often do you get a comment, hey, we're not doing this, which I think is really strange, right? Because if you look at Atlassian, and especially in the past, I know it's still the case, they had a Jira, they had millions of open issues. And imagine there are issues in there with a gazillion upvotes and 10,000 comments, and they're waiting for 5 years. If somebody just had the guts to say, no, we're not doing this, right? Because that's at least, that's what their actions reveal.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we don't dare to do that. And then we have a gazillion of those tickets dragging us down.
Yeah.
We want to do all of them, but we're never going to do all of them.
No, you're absolutely right. At least for them, for Jira, most of their clients are, software developers or people in product. So I guess that they were kind of in the same boat. So we understand that. So it would be very easy for them actually to say those things. We're not going to do that because we would understand the same way that we have these backlogs and we cannot prioritize everything. We cannot do everything. I think we would understand that they cannot do everything.
I think it would be better because I get super frustrated if I see these issues open for years, people adding votes. And I'm like, I don't feel heard. I don't feel taken seriously.
So what's the point? Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. What's the point? They don't care about me. And that I think is very bad because that's the feeling I sometimes get, which isn't true, right? Because I know they're doing a lot, but when you see these things, it doesn't make you feel great as a customer, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Just one last question I have about your now, next, and later. How many items do you usually put in there? Do you have like rules to say, I can only take up to this based on your capacity or velocity, etc., or it's kind of dynamic?
Well, the thing is, it also depends on how many teams you have. But I do believe the purpose of a roadmap is to provide an overview. And I think the moment you start hitting more than 10 things in progress, then it's a lot. Then people will. So yeah, it all depends, right? If you've got 10 teams, then you're going to show a lot of stuff. I don't think you can get around it, but I do think you need to be really mindful. The purpose of a roadmap is to provide an overview. And if you are working on that many things, maybe you're working on too many things at the same time.
And you're stretching too thin.
Yes, exactly. And then you just deliver stuff later, but you appear to be moving faster.
Yeah, there is I forgot the name of the guy that put this together, the 3 buckets method, I think it's called, where you try to balance all of your work based on, things that will move the needle on your outcomes, things that customers are asking for, and then keeping the lights on, like tech debt and whatever. And he suggests that we should always prioritize and keep it balanced so we don't forget about each one of those. Or maybe actually the third one is a delighters, maybe. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think it's actually delighters. Where probably keep the lights on is maybe it should be another bucket. Do you do stuff like that as well?
No, unfortunately, I don't do stuff like that as well.
Yeah, I was just wondering because I think that there is a lot of questions I got also in the past about, how to prioritize and how to really make all of these different pulls and pushes from different places work. But because it's not always about just adding features or
you're right.
It's not always about an outcome of new revenue, but it could be keep the light on, or it could be just reducing churn, or it could be many other things.
Yeah, I think the key thing is you need to figure out what matters most, right? Make sure you apply the right focus. Now, I think it's very difficult to provide a clear-cut answer. Like you need to really, when you join, don't know the customer that well or the business that well. And that allows you to apply that focus because I think that's actually more important than prioritization because prioritization is just the order that you do things, right? But focus, like saying no to things and saying these are the things we should be doing, I think that's way more important than prioritization.
Or at least it's something that supports your prioritization.
Yes, absolutely.
Matt, do you have any other questions? I think that was my last one.
No, this has been really helpful. As someone who's using Jira myself in road mapping, I also use Trello, so part of the Atlassian suite of tools. But this has been really helpful. It's got me thinking about how I'm using it. We use Jira for road mapping where I'm at now, and I've traditionally used it for backlog. So it's definitely got me thinking about how I use it and how I'll continue to use it. So,
maybe at least try it out before we try other products. Yeah. But it's not that we're saying anything about other products. It's whatever fits to everyone.
Yeah. So what I would like to add to that, I think that's a very strong point. Start simple. Like you can start with it literally today in Jira, and then you will discover better what you need. But don't immediately go for a tool because you need to get up and running. It takes a long time. First, hit the ground running, see if it's good enough. And then if you know where it isn't good enough, you have more information to pick a better tool, which does suit your needs. Don't worry too much about the tool.
And in that note, where can everyone find you? I know that a lot of people already know you online, but for those that don't, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Maarten Dalmijn, and I have my own website, maartendalmijn.com or mdalmijn.com or Medium. Those are the places where you can find me.
Thank you so much, Maarten.
Yeah, Maarten, thank you so much for joining the show. This is really a great conversation.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks to all the listeners for joining us today, and we'll talk to you next time. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.